After a long and exhausting shift at the precinct, I was looking forward to nothing more than sinking into my recliner with a glass of whiskey in hand. It had been one of those weeks, back-to-back meetings with city officials, overseeing an ongoing investigation and dealing with department politics. The last thing I expected was to find my own driveway blocked by a bulky white SUV with flashing amber lights, the unmistakable HOA security insignia plastered on the side. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe a patrol had parked in the wrong spot while responding to a neighbor's complaint. But as I pulled up and signaled with a quick honk, the man inside didn't budge. Instead, he lazily leaned out of the window, peering at me like I was some kind of trespasser. "You got business here?" he asked, voice dripping with condescension. I blinked. "Yeah, I live here," I said, pointing at my house, a modern two-story home with an immaculately trimmed front lawn, courtesy of my retired Marine neighbor, who took it upon himself to mow it when I wasn't around. The man, who looked to be in his mid-40s with a beer belly spilling over his belt, eyed me up and down before scoffing. "Not anymore, buddy. You've got unpaid fines with the HOA. Until those are settled, you're not allowed to park here." I stared at him for a long moment, trying to process the sheer stupidity of what I had just heard. "You're blocking my driveway because of some supposed unpaid fines?" "I don't even owe anything." He shrugged. "That's not what the system says." I sighed, already feeling a migraine forming. "Okay, first off, I never received any notices. And second, even if I did owe something, you don't have the authority to block my driveway." "Actually, we do," he said smugly, tapping a laminated piece of paper on his dashboard. "The HOA board approved new enforcement policies last month. Unpaid fines mean no driveway access until payment is made. If you've got a problem, take it up with the board." I could feel my patience thinning. "I am the chief of police. You're literally blocking the driveway of the highest law enforcement officer in the city over a fine I never even received." The man didn't even flinch. "Yeah? Well, that doesn't mean squat here. This is private property governed by the HOA, and you're just another resident." That's when it clicked. He had no idea who I was. Most people in this town did, especially those who had run into my offices before, but HOA enforcers? They were in their own little world. And right now, this guy thought he was untouchable. I exhaled slowly. "All right, move the car." "Not happening. You have 5 seconds. The man's smirk widened. "And what are you going to do, officer? Arrest me?" "Go ahead. HOA rules override city statutes on private property." I felt a slow grin tugging at the corners of my mouth. This was going to be fun. Instead of answering, I put my truck in park, stepped out, and pulled out my phone. If this was how they wanted to play it, I'd make it official. As I dialed, the man's expression finally wavered. "Who are you calling?" he asked, suspicion creeping into his tone. "The department," I said. "You're obstructing private property, unlawfully restricting access to a residence, and falsely claiming enforcement authority. This is about to become a very bad day for you." His smug confidence flickered, but he still held his ground. "You wouldn't waste resources on something this small." I put the phone on speaker. "Dispatch, this is Chief Reynolds. I need a unit at my residence. HOA security is unlawfully blocking my driveway under the pretense of unpaid fines." There was a pause before the dispatcher answered, their voice suddenly alert. "Chief, understood. Sending 2 units now. ETA 4 minutes." The man's face paled. "Wait, Chief." I folded my arms. "That's right. Now move your damn car before this turns into something worse for you." He hesitated for a moment, glancing down at the laminated HOA policy on his dashboard like it might save him. But then another car pulled up, a dark sedan with tinted windows. A woman in a crisp navy blue blazer stepped out, her designer heels clicking against the pavement. HOA Board President Linda Greaves. She took one look at me, then at the uniformed officer stepping out of the first responding patrol car, and her expression twisted into something between forced authority and nervous calculation. "What seems to be the issue here?" she asked in that overly polite, passive-aggressive tone that HOA board members seem to have perfected. "Your security officer is unlawfully blocking my driveway," I said evenly, "claiming I have unpaid fines, which I've never been notified of. I asked him to move, and he refused. Now, this is officially a police matter." Linda's lips thinned. "Well, Chief Reynolds, if you have unpaid fines, then HOA policy states you are not a legal enforcement agency." I cut her off. "And your security has no legal authority to detain, obstruct, or restrict access to private property. If you continue to enforce unlawful actions, you will be personally liable. Is that what you want?" For the first time, I saw a flicker of real concern in her eyes. But she recovered quickly, straightening her blazer. "I'll have to check with the board. There may have been a clerical error." I gestured toward the officer beside me. "Good, because I'll be filing an official complaint, and I expect a full audit of any supposed fines. If this turns out to be part of a larger pattern of extortion or intimidation tactics, your entire board is looking at serious legal consequences." Linda's bravado wavered. "That won't be necessary. Let's resolve this amicably." I turned to the security officer. "Move the car." Now, he didn't need to be told twice. Within seconds, he was fumbling with the keys and hastily reversing out of my driveway, the sweat on his forehead glistening under the streetlights. Linda cleared her throat. "Chief, we'll review your case first thing tomorrow." I gave her a long, measured look. "You do that. But understand this. If I find out you've been running a racket, strong-arming residents into paying bogus fees, you won't just be dealing with fines. You'll be dealing with indictments." With that, I stepped back into my truck and pulled into my now-clear driveway, leaving them standing there, looking like they'd just been hit by a freight train. I had a feeling this was far from over, and I was going to enjoy every second of taking them down. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, my internal clock still set to police mode despite my day off. Last night's confrontation with the HOA had left me more irritated than I cared to admit. I had dealt with criminals, corrupt city officials, and even crooked cops, but HOA enforcers? That was a whole new level of arrogance. As I sipped my coffee, I scrolled through my emails. Sure enough, there was a message from the HOA's official account. Subject line, notice of unpaid fines and legal actions. I clicked it open, half expecting some weak apology, but instead, it was a formal warning. Dear Chief Reynolds, according to HOA policy, your residence has accumulated the following unpaid fines. $500 for improper trash bin placement. $750 for exceeding lawn height regulations. $1,250 for unauthorized vehicle parking in driveway. $200 per day accrued penalty for non-payment. Failure to sell the balance within 72 hours will result in additional enforcement actions, including property liens and further access restrictions. Best regards, Linda Greaves, HOA President. I exhaled through my nose. They were doubling down. Even after last night's warning, they still thought they could intimidate me. Big mistake. I picked up my phone and called my department's fraud division. "Hey, Reynolds here. I need you to pull up any financial records related to HOA fine collections in my neighborhood. Specifically, trends and complaints and where the money is going." The detective on the other end, a seasoned investigator named Mendez, whistled. "You think something's up?" "Oh, I don't think. I know," I said. "Check for irregularities. If they're running a scam, I want proof. Give me a few hours." I hung up and grabbed my keys. It was time to visit the HOA office in person. The HOA's headquarters was a small, nondescript building in a strip mall, wedged between a dry cleaner and a dentist's office. I walked in, immediately greeted by an overly cheerful receptionist with too much makeup and a fake smile. "Can I help you?" she chirped. "Yeah, I'm here to discuss my so-called unpaid fines." Her smile didn't waver, but there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Oh, Chief Reynolds. The board was actually expecting you. One moment, please." I folded my arms, watching as she picked up the phone and whispered something into it before gesturing toward a door marked boardroom. I stepped inside to find Linda Greaves, along with 2 other HOA board members, both middle-aged men in expensive suits. Linda folded her hands on the polished oak table. "Chief, we were just discussing your case. Have you come to settle your fines?" I let out a dry laugh. "You mean the fake ones?" "No. I've come to demand an explanation." One of the board members, a balding man with a thin mustache, scoffed. "There's nothing to explain. You violated HOA rules. There are consequences." I leaned forward. "Is that so?" "Funny, because I had my property checked this morning. My trash bin placement is compliant. My lawn has been professionally maintained, and the so-called unauthorized vehicle in my driveway is my own car. Care to explain how I racked up nearly $3,000 in fines?" Linda adjusted her blazer. "The board reserves the right to impose penalties as necessary." I cut her off. "No, you don't. Not when those penalties are fraudulent. I've already contacted my department's fraud division. They're pulling records as we speak. Now's your last chance to come clean before this turns into a full-blown criminal investigation." The mustache man shifted in his seat. "You wouldn't go that far. You wouldn't waste city resources on something like this." I smiled coldly. "You clearly don't know who I am." Linda swallowed hard, but before she could speak, my phone buzzed. I put it on speaker. "Chief, it's Mendez. You were right. There's something shady going on. The HOA's collected over $500,000 in enforcement fines over the past 2 years, but only 10% of that money actually went to neighborhood improvements. The rest? We traced it to personal accounts linked to Greaves and several board members." Silence fell over the room. I glanced at Linda. "Care to explain that?" She paled. That's a clerical error." Mendez chuckled darkly on the phone. "Oh, yeah? Then how come the largest payments were made to offshore accounts?" One of the board members shot up from his chair. "You can't just barge in here and make accusations." I leaned back. "I don't need to make accusations. The numbers speak for themselves. But since you insist, I'll be filing felony fraud and embezzlement charges against everyone involved. Hope you're ready for some real consequences." Linda shot to her feet. "Wait, we can fix this. There's no need for her." I held up a hand. "The only thing you should be thinking about is whether you want to cooperate or let this go to trial." For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. The HOA had gone unchecked for too long, but today, the game had changed. Linda Greaves stood frozen, her carefully composed expression beginning to crack as the weight of the situation settled in. The other board members exchanged nervous glances, each realizing that their once untouchable reign over the neighborhood was crumbling right before their eyes. I let the silence linger, watching their discomfort grow. I'd seen this kind of panic before. The look of criminals realizing their perfect scam had just been exposed. But this wasn't some street gang or a white-collar fraudster from across town. These were HOA board members. People who had convinced themselves they were immune because their victims were too afraid, too exhausted, or too powerless to fight back. But they had made one critical mistake. They picked the wrong house. I folded my arms and spoke evenly. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me a full breakdown of every fine you've imposed over the last 2 years. Every dollar collected, where it went, and who authorized it." I gestured toward Linda. "And you, specifically, are going to explain how $500,000 of community funds somehow ended up in personal accounts." One of the board members, a portly man with sweat beading at his hairline, wiped his forehead with a trembling hand. "There's no need for the police to be involved, Chief Reynolds. Surely we can—" "Oh, the police are already involved," I cut in. "In fact, They're on their way here now. Linda inhaled sharply. You called them? I smiled. Did you really think I wouldn't? You committed felony fraud under the guise of enforcement fees. You extorted hard-working families, threatened them with property liens, and even tried to block my driveway to squeeze more money out of me. And for what? So you could line your own pockets? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her mind was racing, trying to find an escape route, but there wasn't one. The door burst open. 2 uniformed officers entered, along with Detective Mendez from the Fraud Division. Mendez stepped forward, holding up a stack of printed documents. Well, looks like we've got enough evidence to keep the DA busy for weeks. Offshore accounts, fake HOA expenses, and, get this, a company registered in Greaves' name that's been overcharging for community maintenance fees. He turned to Linda with a smirk. I'm guessing that's just another clerical error, huh? Linda's hands clenched into fists. This is outrageous. You can't. You're under arrest, Mendez interrupted. Fraud, embezzlement, extortion, and abuse of authority. The officers moved in, cuffing her before she could protest further. The other board members stepped back, their faces drained of color. Wait, I didn't, Linda stammered, but it was too late. The officers led her out of the boardroom, and I turned to the remaining board members. I'd suggest you start talking now, because once the investigation digs deeper, anyone involved in the scam is going down with her. The portly man, his name tag read Richard Owens, lifted his hands in surrender. I'll cooperate. I didn't know how deep it went. I just sign off on things. I scoffed. You knew. You all knew. But the DA might go easier on you if you help clean up the mess you made. Mendez crossed his arms. Speaking of cleaning up, we're going to audit every fine imposed under this HOA's leadership. Any fraudulent charges? They're getting refunded. Immediately, I nodded. And as of today, this board is officially dissolved. There's no way you're going to be in charge of this community after what you pulled. One of the officers radioed in. Transport for Greaves is en route. We'll need statements from any affected residents. Already on it, Mendez said. He glanced at me. Chief, I think you just saved an entire neighborhood. I exhaled slowly. It felt good. Asterisk damn good to see justice served. The fallout. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Within hours, residents were stepping out of their homes, watching as Linda Greaves was loaded into a patrol car. Some whispered, others openly cheered. A woman I recognized as Nancy Parks, who had been fined thousands of dollars over unauthorized holiday decorations, approached me with tears in her eyes. Thank you, Chief. We all knew something was wrong, but no one had the power to fight them. I offered her a reassuring nod. That's what they counted on. But it's over now. That afternoon, an emergency town hall was held in the community center. With the corrupt board out of power, a temporary committee was formed to ensure all stolen funds were returned to residents. Mendez presented his findings, and a city official announced that new oversight policies would be put in place to prevent anything like this from happening again. As I stood near the back of the room, my phone buzzed. Mendez. Thought you want to know. Greaves is flipping on the rest of the board. DA is pushing for maximum penalties. I smirked. Good. Epilogue. A new beginning. A month later, things had changed. With the corrupt board dismantled, the HOA's leadership was restructured. New members, actual residents, not power-hungry opportunists, took charge, ensuring the community was run fairly. The fraudulent fines were wiped clean, and money was returned to those who had been scammed. One evening, as I was heading home from work, I saw a familiar security SUV parked outside the HOA office, not blocking driveways, not harassing homeowners, just parked as it should be. The new HOA president, a retired school principal named Janice Porter, greeted me warmly as I passed. Chief Reynolds, I just wanted to thank you again. We're still cleaning up the mess they left behind, but the neighborhood finally feels safe. I nodded. It should have always been that way. She smiled. We're lucky to have you here. I chuckled. Don't mention it. Just make sure no one blocks my driveway again. She laughed. Deal. As I pulled into my now unobstructed driveway, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. I had spent my career taking down criminals. I never thought my biggest bust would be a bunch of HOA crooks. But justice was justice. And this time, the law had finally won. The end.